A pale sun hovered low over the Arctic horizon, its light diffused through a curtain of swirling snow. The world was quiet here, a frozen wasteland stretching beyond sight, its silence broken only by the distant groan of shifting ice. Sergeant Elias Kane moved through it like a phantom. His boots left no trace, his breathing muted by the rebreather built into his mask. The white, ghillie suit cloaked him in invisibility, threads of synthetic fiber catching flecks of frost until he seemed woven from a storm itself. He was alone, but that was nothing new. Solitude was a familiar companion, and in this place, it was his only ally. Command had called it a reconnaissance mission, though Kane knew better. They always used soft words to cover sharp realities. Satellite sweeps had picked up heat signatures near the polar ridge, faint, deliberate, and entirely alien. It was the same pattern recorded before the first attack on Berlin, before the orbital bombardment that had turned the Sahara into glass. This wasn't a probe or a malfunction. Someone was here, and Kane had been sent to confirm who. Or what? The wind howled across the comms tower as he reached the outpost perimeter. It was little more than a cluster of buried domes and one skeletal antenna reaching toward the gray sky. The place had been abandoned weeks ago, when temperatures dropped to lethal lows. He entered through a half-frozen hatch, the metal creaking under his grip. Inside, the air was brittle, smelling of oil and dust. Consoles blinked weakly with emergency power, their light casting ghostly reflections on the walls. Kane slung his rifle over his shoulder and activated the uplink. Static crackled before the AI interface booted to life. Sergeant Kane, it greeted, voice calm and genderless. Authorization code, please. He murmured the sequence from memory, each number and syllable crisp despite the cold. The system verified him, then displayed the satellite feed. 6 points glowed faintly across the northern ridge, moving fast, far too synchronized to be human. He studied their pattern, tracing their path toward his position. "They're hunting," he said under his breath. The AI hesitated before replying. "Orders, Sergeant." "Maintain silence," he answered. "No signals, no pings. If they're scanning, we're invisible." He cut the connection and stepped outside. The light had dimmed further, snow thickening until the landscape became a blur of white and shadow. He crouched low, adjusting the scope of his rifle, a long, matte black instrument designed for one purpose. The weapon had seen more years of war than most soldiers lived to count. Its barrel bore the faint scars of Mars dust storms, its chamber the residue of alien blood. Kane settled into position near a ridge overlooking the valley. He pulled his hood tight and lowered his heartbeat using steady, deliberate breaths. Through the scope, the world sharpened into clarity. Frost-laden pines stood like skeletal sentinels. Between them, movement, just a flicker like heat bending air. He adjusted focus. Nothing. Then again, a shimmer, gone as quickly as it appeared. The stories about the Zarkath warlords were not myths. They were conquerors of entire systems, their warriors engineered for speed and silence. Kane had seen their kind once before during the siege of Phobos. Back then, he had watched 3 platoons die before managing a single shot. That shot, delivered through the skull of a Zarkath commander at 2 kilometers, had bought humanity its first victory. They had never forgiven him for that. He shifted slightly, scanning the horizon again. The movement repeated, 3 points this time, then 4. They were spreading out in formation. His instincts aligned with the data before his conscious mind caught up. This wasn't random reconnaissance. They knew exactly where to look. They had come for him. A calmness settled over him, strange and familiar. Fear was a resource he'd long since spent. What remained was discipline, the mechanical precision of survival. He checked his ammunition, standard tungsten rounds modified with trace disruptors. 6 magazines. Enough for a small war. He adjusted his scope once more, eyes narrowing. Through the snow, a silhouette flickered into partial visibility. The alien was tall, almost graceful, its body sheathed in armor that rippled like liquid metal. A faint pulse of blue light moved along its limbs, a heartbeat of some internal mechanism. Kane could almost hear its low clicks, a guttural language like ice cracking. He centered the reticle on its chest, but didn't fire. Not yet. He wanted to see the pattern, understand their movement. 6 of them, all hunting in silence, each trusting the other to close in. He waited. The minutes bled together, the cold biting deeper. The aliens advanced, each step disturbingly coordinated. Their formation encircled his position, shrinking the radius with methodical precision. Kane's pulse slowed even further, the world reduced to breath, crosshairs, distance, and timing. Then a sound. Soft, rhythmic, out of place. He turned his head slightly, catching it between gusts, the faint hum of adaptive camouflage destabilizing under environmental stress. The one on his right flank was closest, less than 100 meters. He eased the rifle's safety off. The motion was almost silent, just the whisper of metal against glove. He exhaled. The shot cut through the wind like a whisper. No thunder, no recoil beyond a muted tremor in his shoulder. The alien collapsed, body folding into the snow without a sound. Its cloak flickered, revealing a momentary glimpse of its face, a mosaic of scales and hardened flesh, before fading to pale dust. Kane reloaded, chambering the next round. The others froze. Their formation faltered. They hadn't expected resistance. Kane used their hesitation, sliding backward into deeper cover, his movements smooth and practiced. He knew they'd triangulate the shot within seconds, so he was already gone before their sensors pinpointed the trajectory. A plasma bolt scorched the ridge where he'd been. Another followed, burning through layers of ice and stone. The blasts illuminated the valley in brief bursts of azure fire. Kane moved without panic, weaving between snowdrifts, each motion rehearsed 1,000 times in his mind. The terrain was his ally, and he treated it with reverence. He reached a narrow crevasse and crouched low, letting the storm swallow him. He checked his scope once more. The aliens had spread again, scanning with wider arcs. He had drawn their attention, which meant they were cautious now, but also angry. He could use that. Rage made patterns predictable. Kane's thoughts drifted briefly to the lives lost in the first invasion, friends buried under glass cities, names erased by orbital fire. He had promised himself that if they ever returned, he would meet them head-on. No politics, no armies, just one human against their pride. He had kept that promise. Static crackled faintly in his earpiece, a ghost signal from command. He ignored it. Communication would only reveal his position. The only voice he trusted was the one in his head, steady and cold. Snow settled on his shoulders, blending him into the landscape. Through the scope, the remaining 5 hunters shimmered faintly, unaware of the shape watching them from the white abyss. Kane's lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile, though it never reached his eyes. "They've come for me," he whispered again, and in the frozen silence, his words vanished into the wind. The snow had become heavier, falling in dense spirals that blurred the horizon and muted every sound. Kane adjusted the scope of his rifle, watching the 5 remaining hunters fan out through the storm. They moved with precision, each step measured, every movement silent. He had fought soldiers before, assassins and mercenaries, but these creatures were different. They hunted like a collective instinct, a single thought split across multiple bodies. The discipline was almost beautiful. Almost. He dragged his gloved hand through the snow, clearing a small circle in front of him, and began assembling a decoy emitter. It was an old trick, a compact heat projector wired to mimic a human body's thermal signature. Primitive compared to alien technology, but the Zarkath relied too much on their sensors. He placed the emitter 20 meters from his real position and powered it on. Through the scope, a ghostly human form shimmered into existence, a perfect lure. Kane waited, motionless. His heartbeat was a steady metronome. The aliens were cautious now, sweeping the terrain with shifting lenses. He could see their armor adjusting to the cold, light rippling across the plates as the camouflage recalibrated. They moved like predators in an ocean of white, invisible except for faint distortions in the snow. One of them broke formation, creeping toward the false heat source. The others covered its approach, spreading their arcs wider. Kane exhaled slowly, calculating angles. The target reached the decoy, crouched, and extended a clawed hand toward it. That was his window. His finger tightened against the trigger with the precision of a surgeon. The rifle whispered again. The alien's head snapped backward, fragments of armor scattering in the snow. The body fell without a sound. Kane immediately shifted positions, rolling behind an icy ledge, leaving no visible trace. The entire engagement had lasted less than 5 seconds. He crawled through a shallow trench, careful to keep his movements below the ridgeline. His breath fogged inside the mask, but he resisted the urge to wipe it away. Every motion had to serve a purpose. Behind him, he could hear the faint hum of alien scanners activating, their pulses distorting the air. They were triangulating, but he was already gone. He climbed to higher ground, settling beneath a wind-carved rock formation that offered a narrow vantage of the valley below. A plasma blast tore through the snow near his last position. Another followed, a burst of blue light that melted ice into steam. The aliens were retaliating blindly, firing at shadows. Kane adjusted his scope again, watching their movements through the haze. They were panicking, their perfect formation beginning to fray under pressure. He had seen it 100 times before. Disciplined killers unraveling when faced with an enemy they couldn't see or predict. Humans had written entire wars on that principle. He opened a small compartment on his wrist console and pulled a capsule of glucose gel, biting into it to steady his focus. The cold had begun to seep through his armor, gnawing at muscle and bone. He ignored it. Pain was temporary. Survival wasn't. He scanned for new angles, counting the glowing figures through the snow. For remain now. A faint vibration rippled through the ice beneath him. Movement, fast, deliberate. He shifted the rifle a few degrees just as something burst from beneath the surface. The alien lunged upward, claws slashing through the air, its cloak sparking from the strain of movement. Kane rolled aside, narrowly avoiding the strike. The creature's blade grazed his shoulder plate, cutting through fabric and skin. He swung the rifle like a club, smashing the buttstock into the alien's jaw. The sound was like shattering glass. They struggled briefly, two predators in the storm. Kane reached for the sidearm, holstered on his thigh, and fired twice. The rounds tore through the creature's chest, sending it reeling backward. He didn't wait to confirm the kill. Instead, he pushed off the ground, breathing hard, blood warming his left arm. He checked the wound, superficial but messy. He reloaded the rifle, his hands steady despite the pain. 3 left, he muttered. The remaining hunters had gone silent. He could no longer track them visually. Their cloaks had fully re-engaged. He knew what that meant. They were regrouping, planning a coordinated strike. The Zarkath didn't fight alone. They adapted collectively. Each death was information shared among the survivors. They were learning him, reading his tactics like a book written in blood. Kane crouched low and started moving south toward a denser cluster of ice formations. The storm had thickened into near whiteout conditions, an advantage he could exploit. His thermal readings flickered uselessly. Everything was cold. He switched to motion detection, watching faint blips of movement on his visor's display. 2 signatures, one close, one distant. They were circling again. He paused, analyzing the terrain, mind racing through contingencies. He placed 2 proximity charges behind him, subtle enough to be overlooked, but powerful enough to collapse the ridge if triggered. Then he settled into a new sniping position, half buried in snow. He slowed his breathing, aligning scope and crosshairs with the faint motion signature ahead. He could feel the wind shifting, an instinct older than any machine. The nearest alien appeared first, barely a silhouette against the storm. Kane squeezed the trigger. The shot struck center mass, and the figure vanished in an explosion of blue vapor. At the same instant, the second alien's shot flared past him, a plasma bolt scorching the ground inches from his face. The retaliatory blast was fast, too fast. Kane rolled behind cover, heart hammering now, pulse loud in his ears. The ground shook as one of his proximity mines detonated. A cascade of ice collapsed down the ridge, burying something large beneath tons of snow. When the noise faded, only the wind remained. He checked the sensors again. 2 signals left. The odds were shifting, but the danger hadn't lessened. He felt the ache in his shoulder deepen, the cold biting sharper around the wound. He adjusted his stance, gritting his teeth. His mind drifted unbidden to faces long gone, commanders who had once called him a ghost, a weapon shaped by necessity. They were all gone now. All that remained was him. The last whisper of a war humanity had almost lost. He scanned the horizon once more, but the sensors were blank. No movement, no heat. The silence felt wrong, too perfect, too measured. He knew a trap when he saw one. The Zarkath were trying to force him into motion, to make him expose himself. He resisted the urge. Patience was his strongest weapon. He stayed still for what felt like an hour, his breathing steady, his focus unbroken. Then he saw it, a faint flicker of distortion, no more than a ripple in the falling snow. He adjusted the scope and waited for the pattern to repeat. It did. He fired. The alien dropped, its cloak failing mid-fall, body tumbling into a heap. Blue light leaked from its wounds, staining the snow. Kane reloaded again, scanning for the last one. Nothing. The valley was still. He allowed himself one long breath, the kind soldiers take when they realize they've survived another round. But the calm didn't last. A soft clicking echoed through the storm, closer than it should have been. He turned sharply, rifle raised, but there was only snow. Then he saw the faintest outline, a ripple no more than a meter away. The last hunter was almost upon him. Kane fired point blank. The impact hurled the creature backward, its blood sizzling against the frozen ground. Silence reclaimed the valley. He lowered his weapon, breathing heavy but steady. Snowflakes gathered on his gloves, melting against the heat of his pulse. He looked toward the ridgeline, the storm still raging. 2 left when I started, he murmured, voice rough with exhaustion. None now. He wiped the blood from his shoulder and began to reload. The hunt was far from over. Somewhere beyond the blizzard, the true commander was waiting. Kane could feel it, the eyes of something older, more dangerous, watching him through the storm. He adjusted his rifle, whispering to himself, your move. The storm had grown darker, as if the sky itself conspired to erase everything beneath it. The snow no longer fell, it devoured. Kane crouched behind a ridge of fractured ice, his rifle cradled against his chest, every movement deliberate. The wind howled like a living thing, but his mind was quiet, sharpened to a single purpose. Somewhere beyond the white abyss, 2 of the Zarkath hunters remained, and one of them was their leader. The pattern of movement had changed, too calculated now to be instinct. They had stopped chasing him. They were waiting. He adjusted the dial on his visor, shifting through spectral modes until faint distortions appeared, a trail of heat residue, almost invisible, leading north toward the glacier field. Bait. He recognized the tactic instantly. They wanted him to follow, to move into open ground where their advantage returned. The logical choice was to stay hidden, to wait them out. But logic didn't kill enemies. Action did. Kane checked his rifle's chamber, running fingers along the metal, as if reaffirming a pact. He had 1 explosive round left, a relic from the First War, designed to pierce even Zarkath command armor. He thumbed it into place, the sound soft but satisfying. Then he began to move. The terrain changed as he advanced. The snow thinned, giving way to jagged ice formations and frozen crevasses that glowed faintly from bioluminescent crystals trapped within. The light painted the storm in eerie hues of blue and violet, illuminating the alien architecture beneath the glacier. Kane's breath misted before him, rhythmic controlled. The storm's howl was softer here, muffled by the ice walls. It almost felt sacred, like trespassing in a cathedral of frost. Then he heard it, a low resonance, too deep to be wind. He froze, listening. The sound came again, pulsing through the ground like a heartbeat. The Zarkath were communicating, not with words but through vibrations carried in the ice. He could feel it beneath his boots, subtle tremors that mapped their coordination. The realization chilled him more than the cold ever could. They were not just hunters. They were a network, every move connected, every death absorbed in a shared memory. Killing them had only taught the survivors how to fight him better. He continued forward, slower now. Every instinct screamed that he was walking into a trap, but he needed to draw the leader out. The glacier opened into a wide basin filled with mist. He crouched low, scanning through his scope. Nothing but haze and shifting light. He reached for his motion sensor, placing it on the ice beside him. The screen flickered, one blip, then two, closing from opposite directions. Kane steadied his breathing, feeling the weight of the rifle anchor him. The first shadow emerged to his right, faint but tangible. He turned, ready to fire, when another distortion appeared directly ahead. They were coordinating again, flanking him perfectly. He fired at the nearest form. The bullet tore through a blur of movement, and the snow erupted in a plume of vapor. But before he could adjust, a plasma bolt hissed past his ear, melting a streak through his hood. He rolled to the side, firing twice in quick succession. The first shot missed. The second hit something solid. A scream, alien, guttural, too close. He slid behind an ice pillar, heart hammering now, the pain in his shoulder pulsing with every beat. He pressed a gloved hand against the wound. The blood had frozen into a crusted layer, but the heat of battle had kept him moving. The surviving aliens circled the other side of the pillar, silent as smoke. Kane could see faint blue light reflecting off the ice, a shimmer from its armor. He reached for the combat knife strapped to his thigh and pressed his back against the pillar, waiting. The creature struck first, lunging from a mist with inhuman speed. Kane turned into the motion, the knife flashing upward. The blade met resistance, cutting through armor plates into flesh. The alien roared, claws raking across his chest, knocking him backward. Pain exploded through his ribs, but he didn't let go of the knife. He twisted it deeper, feeling the vibration as bones split. The creature collapsed, dragging him down into the snow. Kane rolled free, panting, every muscle screaming. The alien twitched once, then stilled. He knelt beside it, studying the body. The armor was patterned differently, denser, reinforced. This one hadn't been just a hunter. It was a lieutenant. That meant the last one, the leader, was close. Kane wiped the blood from his blade and retrieved his rifle. He could sense eyes on him, something cold and ancient watching from a mist. He had crossed into the leader's domain. A voice crackled through his comms, low and distorted, not human. Ghostline, it hissed in broken English, the words stretched through static. You kill my kin. You bleed our honor. Kane froze, the sound crawling through his nerves. He hadn't expected communication. He raised his rifle toward the source of the voice, scanning through the mist. You talk now, he said quietly. Guess evolution's catching up. The reply came like a growl. You are prey, human, small, fragile, yet you hide in snow and strike from dark. I see why they fear you. Kane smirked beneath his mask. Fear's efficient. Saves me bullets. A sudden blur to his left. He turned, but the leader moved faster than sight. A massive form slammed into him, sending both crashing into the ice. His rifle skidded away. Kane hit the ground hard, air ripped from his lungs. The alien towered over him, armor gleaming faintly with the same shifting light as the crystals. It raised a blade, long and curved, humming with energy. Kane rolled aside, the blade slicing into the ice where his chest had been. Shards exploded into the air. He scrambled for his sidearm, firing 3 rounds into the creature's torso. The bullets sparked harmlessly off its armor. The alien laughed, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated in the ice. You cannot win, it said. Kane's eyes flicked toward his rifle, lying a few meters away. The explosive round still chambered. He needed one clean shot. He baited the alien, staggering backward, letting exhaustion show. The creature advanced slowly, confident, savoring its advantage. He lunged sideways, sliding across the ice, fingers brushing the rifle's grip. The alien struck again, blade carving through air just above him. Kane rolled onto his stomach, swinging the rifle up in one motion. The leader turned, too late. Kane fired. The bullet struck center mass. The explosion shattered the air, sending shockwaves through the glacier. The alien's armor cracked, light bursting from within like molten glass. It fell to one knee, snarling, claws digging into the ice. Kane rose unsteadily, breath ragged, rifle trembling in his grip. The creature looked at him, eyes dimming but defiant. "You think you win," it rasped. "You are one. We are many." Kane didn't answer. He aimed again, his voice low. "Then send more." He pulled the trigger. The shot ended it. Silence fell again, broken only by the wind whispering through the ravine. Kane stood there for a long time, staring at the smoking corpse, the smell of burned ozone sharp in the air. He felt no triumph, only a weary stillness. He wiped frost from his visor, turning his gaze toward the horizon. The storm was beginning to clear, faint sunlight pushing through the clouds. For the first time, he could see beyond the valley. Then his visor flickered. A faint signal appeared, multiple blips, distant but moving toward his coordinates. Reinforcements. Not human. He sighed, exhaustion settling over him like another layer of snow. The fight was not over. It never was. He adjusted the strap on his rifle, eyes narrowing as he looked into the white distance. Round two, then, he muttered and disappeared back into the storm. The wind had shifted again, carrying with it the scent of scorched metal and ozone. Kane stood among the wreckage of the glacier, his rifle heavy in his hands, the heat from the last explosion already fading into the relentless cold. The leader's body had stopped steaming, fragments of armor frozen where they fell. For a long moment, he simply breathed, letting the silence settle like dust. But peace, he knew, was a lie whispered between battles. His visor still pulsed with motion, multiple signals closing fast. The reinforcements the dying alien had promised were real. He crouched and retrieved an intact shard of Zarkath armor, its surface slick and shifting like liquid glass. Beneath the alien sigils, faint energy still pulsed. He turned it over in his hand, recognizing its function, a locator beacon. That was how they had found him. He tossed it aside, crushing it beneath his boot. "Not again," he muttered. The storm had weakened, exposing the fractured horizon. The valley stretched beneath a bruised sky, pale light reflecting off the snow like silver fire. Somewhere beyond that ridge, the newcomers were closing in. Kane reloaded his rifle, fingers stiff with cold, but movements precise, automatic. His shoulder burned, ribs ached, yet his mind remained sharp. He had survived this long because of discipline, not luck. He scanned the terrain, calculating vantage points, lines of fire, escape routes. He would not win this fight through endurance. He would win it through strategy. The aliens believed humans were inferior, emotional, chaotic, primitive. Let them keep believing. That arrogance was always their weakness. He moved toward the upper ridge, leaving shallow prints that the wind erased behind him. Each step was careful, deliberate, guided by instinct rather than sight. He reached a plateau, overlooking the basin, and crouched low. The snow had softened into powder, glistening under the dim light. He adjusted his rifle scope, scanning the field. The first shapes emerged from the storm, tall, armored, gleaming faintly with bioluminescent veins. At least half a dozen, perhaps more. They moved cautiously, spreading across the valley like wolves testing unfamiliar ground. Kane placed a small control module beside him, linking it to the mines he had planted earlier. He had turned the glacier into a weapon, each ridge and crack mapped into his memory. If the Zarkath wanted to walk into hell, he would be their guide. He exhaled slowly, focusing his scope on the lead alien. This one was different, bulkier, armor laced with energy conduits, eyes burning faint gold instead of blue. A commander. He could almost sense its disdain through the glass. He waited until the formation reached the center of the basin, then flicked the detonator. The ground erupted in thunder. Shards of ice and snow launched skyward as the charges collapsed the ridge. Two aliens vanished instantly, swallowed by falling debris. The rest scattered, roaring in their guttural tongue, firing blindly into the haze. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, lighting the storm in flashes of cobalt and white. Kane fired back once, twice, each shot precise, deliberate. Two more fell. He shifted position before they could locate his angle, crawling along the ridge, body merging with the terrain. His breathing came fast now, the pain in his chest stabbing with every inhale. The aliens regrouped, forming a perimeter. One activated a scanning drone that swept the area with crimson light. Kane pressed deeper into the snow, heart thundering as the beam passed inches from him. The drone paused, hesitated, then moved on. He released a slow breath. He had seconds before they recalibrated. He aimed again, targeting the drone's carrier. A single shot dropped it, sparks scattering across the ice. The others reacted instantly, focusing their fire on his position. The ridge exploded behind him as plasma bolts tore through it. He rolled downhill, snow swallowing him whole, body tumbling until he struck solid ground. Pain flared, but he forced himself up, half-crouched, rifle ready. He was cornered now. No more ridges, no more escape. For a moment, the valley was chaos, smoke, snow, the hiss of melting ice. Then, from within the fog, a voice boomed, amplified through alien speakers. Human sniper, it said, words heavy and deliberate. You kill many. You defy the warlord's will. Surrender, and your death will be clean. Kane almost laughed, the sound dry in his throat. Clean's never been part of the job, he murmured. He steadied the rifle and waited for movement. The voice came again, closer this time. You are flesh. You bleed. You end. Maybe, Kane whispered, but so do you. He spotted a flicker of motion to his left, a shimmer in the mist, the telltale glitch of a half-cloaked form. He fired before it fully materialized. The shot struck home, and the alien fell, screaming as its armor imploded inward. The others hesitated, unnerved by the precision. Kane used the pause to crawl behind a fractured pillar of ice, checking his remaining ammunition. 2 rounds left. He ran a quick systems check. Visor cracked, sensors failing, comms dead. Perfect. Just him and them, the way he preferred it. He heard the crunch of heavy steps approaching. The commander had come personally, its form emerging through the fog, towering, deliberate. Its armor shimmered with faint gold currents, symbols glowing along its chest. Kane steadied himself, crouched behind the ice. His muscles trembled, not from fear but from exhaustion. The alien stopped a few meters away, scanning the ground. It knew he was close. You hide, it said, voice metallic. But your courage amuses me. You kill like a beast cornered, yet your kind will fall. You are the last echo of a dying world. Kane raised his rifle slowly, lining the shot with the faint reflection of the alien's armor. Funny, he said quietly. That echo keeps killing you. He pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through the alien's shoulder, spinning it sideways. The commander roared, firing a plasma blast that scorched the ice above him. Kane rolled, the heat grazing his leg, the air filled with burning ozone. He fired again, striking its chest plate, but the armor held. The alien charged. Kane dove aside, barely escaping the blow that shattered the ice where he'd been standing. They collided near the edge of the basin, grappling among broken shards. The alien's strength was monstrous, pressing him down, claws closing around his throat. Kane fought for air, hand fumbling at his belt until he found the last thermal grenade. He jammed it between them and triggered the switch. The explosion was muted but brutal, the heat wave melting snow into steam. The alien staggered back, armor sizzling. Kane rolled to his knees, coughing, vision blurred. He raised his rifle one last time. The commander lifted its weapon too, aiming directly at him. They fired simultaneously. The plasma bolt scorched past his shoulder, but his bullet found its mark. The round struck the alien's throat, piercing through. The creature convulsed, then fell, collapsing into the snow with a hiss of escaping gas. Kane stayed still, listening, waiting for another signal, another sound. There was nothing. The valley had gone quiet again, save for the slow crackle of melting ice. He lowered the rifle and let out a long breath. The cold bit deep, but it didn't matter. The fight was over. For now. He looked toward the horizon, where faint sunlight bled through thinning clouds. The storm was breaking. He could see blue sky for the first time in what felt like years. He reached up, removing his mask. The air burned his lungs, sharp and clean. He tasted iron and frost. He stood there for a long while, staring at the rising light. When his calm finally crackled back to life, the voice on the other end was thin with static. Sergeant Kane confirmed status. He hesitated before answering. Threat neutralized, he said quietly. Earth still stands. He looked once more at the battlefield, the smoking craters, the alien corpses half buried in snow, and then at the distant horizon beyond them. Send word to command, he added. They'll come again. And when they do, I'll be waiting. He slung his rifle across his back and began walking toward the light, footsteps vanishing behind him as the wind swept the snow clean. Above, the first rays of dawn spread across the ice, and for a moment, the world was still.